The presence of Burlingame Canyon, Toutle Canyon near Mount St. Helens, and various erosion features in the Eastern Washington Scablands verify that sizable canyons may be formed in only a few days with a small amount of water relative to that which was available during the Noahic flood. So rapid formation of the Grand Canyon several thousand years ago, during and after the recession of this global flood, is quite feasible, contrary to the claims of evolutionists who believe several million years were necessary to carve this great geologic feature. In 1904, the Gardena farming district constructed a series of irrigation canals, and one of these became plugged in 1926. To clear the obstruction from the canal, engineers opted to divert the backed up water from the canal into a small ditch discharging to nearby Pine Creek. In just 6 days, this water flow transformed the little ditch into an impressive canyon, 1,500 feet long, 120 feet wide, and 120 feet deep. The eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980 was actually a series of volcanic explosions and pyroclastic flows that began on March 27th. The initial series of phreatic blasts escalated into a major volcanic eruption on May 18, 1980, which rocked the state of Washington and many surrounding states while traveling at an initial speed of over 650 miles per hour, destroying 150 square miles of adjacent forest and snapping 200 feet tall Douglas fir trees like toothpicks within just 6 minutes. The total energy output during the subsequent 9-hour eruption was equivalent to 440 million tons of TNT, or about 33,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs, which is approximately one bomb exploding every second for 9 hours. While Mount St. Helens is often declared the most disastrous volcanic eruption in U.S. history, this is likely not the case, for while it spewed 1/4 cubic miles of ash, evidence exists that the Crater Lake, Long Valley Independence Dike, and 2 separate Yellowstone mega-eruptions sent 17, 150, 4,000, 240, and 600 cubic miles of ash, respectively, into the atmosphere. Still, despite its relative weakness, the Mount St. Helens eruption has become an excellent modern example of the significant and rapid influence a catastrophic event can have on the landscape. Snow filled the crater left by the initial explosion, and then a much smaller eruption on March 19, 1982 instantly turned the snow into water and spawned a massive mudslide, which then carved, during a single day, a series of canyons from what was once relatively flat terrain. Toutle Canyon, which is up to 140 feet deep and about 1/40th the size of the Grand Canyon, was the largest of these newly created landforms. 2 additional smaller canyon systems, Louette and Step, were also cut to more than 100 and 600 feet deep, respectively, on that date. The North Fork of the Toutle River, southwest of Spirit Lake, and Mount St. Helens further reveals the astounding fact that geologic features can form very quickly instead of requiring millions of years. This slide displays 3 separate events, the first of which occurred on May 18, 1980, in coordination with the initial volcano blast. During a single day, a large volume of volcanic material settled to become the bottom layer. The top layer was also deposited in one day by the same mud flow that created Toutle Canyon. The 25 feet thick middle section is truly amazing, for it was observed to form about 100 individual fine layers in just a few hours on June 12, 1980, when pulses of a hot and gaseous pyroclastic silt, sand, and rock slurry flowed by. If an evolutionist saw this series of layers without knowing what happened, they would have concluded it took millions of years to form, but they would clearly be wrong. The Natural Scientific Laboratory at Mount St. Helens defies evolutionary theory and confirms geologic layer accumulation, river valleys, and large canyons can form quickly during and following catastrophic events. The water that created Burlingame Canyon and mud flow that formed Toutle Canyon is child's play compared to the volume of water associated with and after effects of the mighty Missoula Flood, which was rejected by secular scientists for 40 years since it seemed too biblical, but was finally accepted as reality by them in the 1960s when the evidence became overwhelming. Glacial Lake Missoula, whose topographic boundary has been well defined by scientists, covered more than 3,000 square miles of what is now western Montana, featured an icy dam exceeding 2,000 feet in height, and stored 540 cubic miles of water, which is nearly 5 times the volume of Lake Erie. A worldwide flood provides an excellent mechanism for the single known ice age and existence of massive glacial lakes such as Missoula, since it would have provided a remnant water source and icy dam while causing sinking valleys and rising mountains, exactly as described by the Bible in Psalm 104:8. After the glacial dam finally broke, a volume of water equaling 15 times the total combined discharge of all the world's rivers burst forth and reshaped the U.S. landscape from Montana to the Pacific Ocean in less than 1 week. The flood transported countless tons of material from eastern Washington to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Enormous rocks and boulders carried down the Columbia River Gorge can still be seen near the present-day city of Portland. Monumental gravel bars were also deposited, including one that is 20 miles long near Vantage, Washington, and another 400 feet high that covers 200 square miles and form the base for Portland's Alameda Ridge neighborhood. Now let's quickly look at more of the astounding geologic work that was accomplished by a 3,000 square mile, 450 feet high, and at least 60 mile per hour tidal wave of water over the course of about 1 week. Awe-inspiring erosional features such as the Columbia River Gorge, 900 feet deep, 50-mile long Grand Coulee, 900 feet deep channeled Scablands, and dry falls were directly caused by the Missoula Flood. To further exemplify how large this catastrophe was, Dry Falls is 3.5 miles wide and features 400 feet tall sheer cliffs, which means Dry Falls is 3.5 times wider and about 2.5 times higher than Niagara Falls. Overall, the Missoula Flood removed 50 cubic miles of hard lava and silt from the Eastern Washington landscape. After reluctantly accepting the inescapable proof, secular geologists have now identified as many as 100 gigantic, so-called paleofloods that carved sections of the earth similar to the lake-caused Missoula Flood. So, with this observed evidence, it's entirely reasonable to conclude the Grand Canyon was formed by a lot of water in a little time instead of by the little Colorado River in a lot of time. The relatively small Colorado River simply does not have enough hydraulic force to carve a canyon up to 18 miles wide, 6,000 feet deep, and 277 miles long, especially since topography dictates it must have originally run uphill through the Kaibab Plateau to start the Grand Canyon, which is not possible. If the tiny river slowly gouged 900 cubic miles of sediment from Earth's surface to form the canyon, then an enormous delta, literally several hundred miles long, would remain at its mouth where it empties into the Gulf of California, but this delta doesn't exist. Further, Grand Canyon's deep, sheer cliffs are still covered with colorful desert varnish, which is evidence of little rockfall and long-term stability, presenting a major challenge to the uniformitarian evolutionary timescale. The lack of talus debris at the canyon cliff base and nearby remnant landforms such as Red Butte and Cedar Mountain also pose serious problems for the evolutionary worldview. Additionally, if the Colorado River formed the Grand Canyon, then we should see on Earth's surface absolutely colossal canyons carved by rivers much larger and more powerful than the Colorado, but we don't. While the weak Colorado River is not a sufficient cause for the canyon, the combined force of the now drained 30,000 square mile Canyonlands and Hopi lakes certainly could have created it. As with glacial Lake Missoula, the topographic boundaries of these former lakes can be accurately determined, and their total discharge rate, volume, and velocity would have been very impressive indeed. The approximately 3,000 cubic mile combined volume of these lakes is an estimated 3 times larger than Lake Michigan and equal to more than 5 Lake Missoulas. These lakes were located in the right position and had enough total energy to reasonably carve the Grand Canyon in just a few weeks, especially if the sedimentary rock in this area remained somewhat soft following the worldwide flood. We should also recognize that, since Canyonlands, Hopi, and Missoula lakes were evidently able to quickly form some of the most impressive geologic features on Earth, it's quite logical to conclude a worldwide biblical flood involving much more water and force than these lakes was a driving force and is in fact the only real explanation for the numerous and various monumental erosional features we see across the globe.